What's up, Star Wars nerds, and welcome to another episode of Brett on Fett. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about 30 Black Series figures that we still need in the Vintage Collection. Let's get to it.
He is exactly like you in every way. Except
5/8
your size.
Breathtaking. I shall call him
TVC. Welcome back to the channel. This is episode 17 of Brett on Fett. And you know, when it comes to Star Wars toys, the 3 3/4 scale action figures has been the tried and true traditional action figure line for the past 44 years. The 6-inch Black Series line came along in 2013, and so relatively speaking, it's still sort of the new kid on the block. But did you know that the Black Series currently has 70 versions of characters not available in the Vintage Collection, and a whopping 116 characters that are not available at all in any version on the Vintage Collection? How embarrassing.
How embarrassing.
So for this episode, I want to make things real easy for Hasbro, and I've come up with a list of 30 current Black Series figures that Hasbro could simply make a smaller scale version of, update the face with the latest photoreal technology, and slap it on a vintage style card and call it a day. In fact, some of these figures on my list, Hasbro has already done vintage style cards for in previous lines. So all they'd have to do is update the back with all the boring words they like to use these days, and then slap a VC number on it, preferably one that hasn't already been used. Oh, and don't forget to put a bubble on the card as well, Hasbro. Alright, so let's take a look at my list for 30 current Black Series figures that Hasbro needs to make a Vintage Collection version of. Alright, so kicking off the list at number 30 and number 29, both from the video game Jedi Fallen Order, I have Cal Kestis, the main character, and the second Sister Inquisitor, one of the main antagonists from that game. Both of these figures came out on the Red Line Black Series or Phase 3 Black Series. And both are very popular characters that a lot of people would love to see in the Vintage Collection. And then at number 28, a classic character, the Hoth version of Han Solo in his parka from The Empire Strikes Back. I can't believe we haven't had this guy in the Vintage Collection yet. But the good news is Hasbro's already made a vintage style card for this character back in 2007 under the Saga collection. So they could just reuse that card. Next up, for numbers 27 through 23, I have the 5 main members of the Bad Batch squad. Note that I didn't include Omega. I just couldn't find a spot for her in the top 30 and didn't think she was nearly as important as these 5 main characters. So I have number 27, Hunter, number 26, Wrecker, 25, Tech, 24, Echo, and 23, Crosshair. We just got to get these guys from that show. Hasbro did release a 4-pack from the Bad Batch, but it was none of the Bad Batch members. Don't get me wrong, they were great figures, I loved them. But if you're going to give us figures from the show, you gotta give us the figures that the show is named after. For numbers 22 through 20, I have 3 members of the Ghost crew from the show Rebels. At number 22, I have Kanan Jarrus, 21 I have Sabine Wren, and number 20 I have Chopper. You'll note that I've left out Hera Syndulla and Zeb Aurelius, 2 very important members of the crew, but I just couldn't find room for all 5 in this top 30, and these 3 were my favorite of the 5, so unfortunately I had to leave Zeb and Hera out. If I did a top 32, those 2 would probably be at 32 and 31, so here we are. For numbers 19 and 18, I have a couple of more classic original trilogy characters. At number 19, I have the Scout Trooper from Return of the Jedi, and at number 18, the Snow Trooper from The Empire Strikes Back. classic characters from the original 96 that we need in the vintage collection. And both of these already have vintage style card backs that Hasbro used for the Saga collection. For numbers 17 and 16, I have two prominent members from the film Rogue One. I have Baze Malbus and Saw Gerrera, two awesome characters that we desperately need in the vintage collection. I will note that I did leave Bodhi Rook off this top 30 list, similar to with the Rebels characters I left off. I just couldn't find a place for him, unfortunately. He's a great character, but just had to leave him off. Then at number 15, another classic original 96 character, the AT-AT driver from The Empire Strikes Back. Definitely a must for the vintage collection. Classic card back on that one. At number 14, I have Asajj Ventress from the Clone Wars. Very popular character, very important villain in that show. Awesome Black Series figure, gotta have her in the vintage collection. And then at number 13, going back to another classic original 96, we have Greedo from A New Hope. And like some of those other original trilogy characters, this one also has a vintage style card already that Hasbro used in the Saga collection. Up next at number 12, I have Director Krennic from Rogue One. How we have so many Rogue One characters in the vintage collection but don't have the main bad guy from the movie is beyond me. So it is way overdue that we get Krennic in the vintage collection. And then at number 11, I have Paz Vizsla from The Mandalorian. Just an awesome character. We definitely need him on a TVC card back. I'm sure Hasbro's going to classify him as a deluxe figure because he's so big. It's just a matter, is he going to be on an actual large bubble on card, or are they going to put him in a sealed box like they've done with some of those recent deluxe figures? With all the plastic-free talk going on, very likely it will be a sealed box, but I'm going to keep some sliver of hope alive. And breaking into the top 10, I have a couple of must-have villains for the vintage collection. At number 10, I have Count Dooku from Attack of the Clones. Long overdue major villain from the film that we still do not have, which is so crazy. And then number 9, one of my all-time favorite villains, Thrawn from Rebels. Now I put from Rebels because that's what he's currently from, but most likely if we do get him on TVC, it will be on an Ahsoka card, since it's basically confirmed, it is confirmed, that he will be a villain on that show. So most likely we'll get him as a part of the Ahsoka series. And at number 8, I have Old Ben, Obi-Wan Kenobi from the original Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. Gotta have this classic original 96 character, one of the main characters of the film. I'm not sure why we haven't gotten him yet. But especially with the Obi-Wan Kenobi series coming out, I think this would be a good time to go ahead and announce him for the line. And the good news is, again, Hasbro's already made a vintage style card of him from the original trilogy collection back in 2004, so they could just reuse that card. Next up, for numbers 7 and 6, I have two of my favorite bounty hunters, original trilogy characters, original 96. You have at number 7, I have Bossk from Empire Strikes Back, and at number 6, I have IG-88 from The Empire Strikes Back. Classic characters, gotta have them. Both cases, we had vintage cards already from the Saga collection that could be reused. And to tell you the truth, both of these figures were actually really awesome back then, and they could probably even get away with reusing them. I know they could with the Bossk, probably the IG-88 as well. And cracking up the top 5, I have Princess Leia Organa from the original Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. This is the definitive Leia that most people know and love, with her hair in the buns, in the white gown that she wears most of the movie. This is one of the first 4 action figures Kenner ever put out for Star Wars, and she's one of the main characters of the original trilogy, so how we don't have this version of Leia in the vintage collection already is crazy. But again, the good news is Hasbro's already done a vintage style card for this version of Leia back in the original trilogy collection from 2004. And it's an awesome card back, one of my favorites. And just like we're missing the original version of Leia from A New Hope, we're also missing that original classic version of Han Solo from A New Hope. So I have Han Solo at number 4. This particular Black Series version came with the Stormtrooper utility belt that he put on the Death Star escape. I would leave that off on the TVC version. It could be included, but I just would keep it off to the side. You know, you can note that we did get a similar version of Han in TVC with the awards ceremony, but that was just a really bad version. We need the classic version with this classic card back that Hasbro's already done in the original trilogy collection. And to round out the main characters from A New Hope that we're missing in the vintage collection, I have at number 3 Luke Skywalker, aka Farm Boy Luke, from Episode 4, A New Hope. Again, just the classic, definitive version of Luke that most people think of when they think of this character. He's one of the first figures Kenner ever made. It's a classic card back. It's just, I've got it at number 3, but you could argue this is the most important vintage collection figure we still need. And like so many of the others, Hasbro's already put out a vintage style card back for this guy that they could reuse. And at number 2, one of the coolest looking Star Wars characters from the video game Knights of the Old Republic and the Expanded Universe, I have Darth Revan. Just such a cool character, both the way he looks and his whole backstory is so interesting. The last time and only time we've gotten this guy in a 3 3/4 scale was from the 30th anniversary. You know, good figure, but it just had some inaccuracies, and it's just, you know, it doesn't have the posability that you can get with vintage collection, so it desperately needs an update, and it would be so awesome to have this guy on a vintage style card back. And finally, for number 1, if you've been following my channel, you know I've been barking up this tree for a while. Gotta have Cad Bane. I'm showing here from the Clone Wars version. That would be my preference if we got the Clone Wars card back for him. But I would be perfectly fine if we got him on a Book of Boba Fett or even Bad Batch. Whatever version of him Hasbro wants to throw at us, I'll take. But we gotta have Cad Bane. He's just way too cool of a character to not have in the vintage collection. I can't wait to see what he will look like on a card back. Please, 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 Hasbro, give us a Cad Bane on a proper vintage collection card back with a bubble before you carry out all this plastic-free nonsense. You've gotta get Cad Bane on a TVC card. It's gotta happen. Make it happen. Thank you. And before we wrap up, I did want to just make a note that I did consider Black Chrysanthemum for the list. However, I wanted this list to be Black Series figures that Hasbro could simply scale down and reuse at a smaller scale. And there is no way in hell any of us want Hasbro to scale down that monstrosity that is the Black Series Black Chrysanthemum. That is basically just Chewbacca painted black. So, had they had a good version of him, he definitely would have been on this list. I'm sure he would have been in the top 10, but I made him ineligible based on how terrible the Black Series version is. Alright, so that's my list of 30 Black Series figures we still need in the vintage collection. I'm holding right here one of those 30. This is the Bosk. This is a prime example of an extremely easy figure they could do. As far as I'm concerned, they could reuse this exact same Bosk figure. This was an excellent version of Bosk. Throw it on this vintage style card back, and then all they gotta do is update the back to their new style with all the boring words and show the wave across, and call it a day. I mean, this is an example of a very easy figure they could add for the vintage collection, yet one that's very important to most vintage collection collectors. Alright, so let me know in the comments what you thought about my list. Where did you agree? Where did you disagree? And what figures would you put on there that maybe I left out? Thanks so much for watching. Thank you so much to my subscribers. And please note that now, in addition to Instagram and Facebook, you can also follow me on Twitter. Take care, and we'll see you next time.